Okay. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here today, and hopefully a few more people will stream back into the room as I move forward in the presentation. My name's David Greenwood, and over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through my journey with LLMs over the past 12 months, and more specifically, my experiments with AI when it comes to structuring and performing threat research. Hopefully, you'll walk away from today's session ready to hack together your own large language model. A short disclosure, along with 99% of LinkedIn, I consider myself a pseudo-AI expert. I work for a company that builds a threat intel platform. I'm a product manager by trade. I've spent decades building intelligence tools for governments, national security agencies, and very large organizations, maybe a few that some of you in the room work for today. I sound really arrogant, don't I? But it's only over the last year or so that I've really took an interest in AI as the consumer level of the technology has started to evolve. And I also consider myself a pseudo-expert in philosophy. I really am arrogant, aren't I? But if we distill it down, AI is just a simulation of human intelligence processes. These processes are based on learnings from data previously learned. Now, the first known data store that we know existed was invented 22,000 years ago. It was just a simple tally stick. I'm not sure how you'd train an AI model on it, so no questions on that, please. And as we progress over time, we start to develop languages and symbols to describe things, a more descriptive way to transfer that knowledge. Through to gathering that knowledge together in a single place, the early evolution of libraries. Through to what we're more familiar with today, although libraries do still exist, although I can't remember the last time I went to one. We get into the computer age. We start to store and retrieve data at scale. Maybe not at the scale of data we're used to retrieving today. You all know what the internet does. Cat videos, memes, porn, which brings us to the AI revolution. And the field of AI is nothing new. If you research textbooks and papers, AI was being discussed in the 50s. But it's only now do we have the computational power to really be able to realize that research. And that's why we've started to see the advent of so many new consumer and commercially focused AI companies. ChatGPT probably being the one most consumers understand and are aware of. And along with those consumers, I'm sure you've been through the 3 stages of discovering ChatGPT over a year ago now. You get the first stage, the panic that, this thing is going to take my job. I'm going to become redundant. I'm going to be destitute. And between us, there's actually a stage before that. It's actually being able to name it correctly. Half my family still call it ChatGTP. The second stage being, I'm going to challenge this thing. A machine can't be smarter than me. Through to the, wait. Maybe it is smarter than me. I'll use this for everything phase. And when we speak about AI in a professional context, I often get a lot of pushback from really what is the fear of the unknown, especially around job security. And even though the job market is a real mess right now, I'd argue in terms of job security when it comes to AI, most of us in the room are in pretty secure places. But regardless of industry, ultimately those who will prosper are those who embrace and take AI to stay relevant. And one of the reasons for job security, especially in the world of CTI, is things move very quickly. Attack vectors evolve, malware changes over time, the machine via which it's distributed, it changes quickly. A model trained on data, even from the middle of this year, can become outdated very quickly in our world. So the open models, they just don't have the live battlefield data that's often needed to perform research as it currently stands. But jumping back into our time machine and going back a bit, AI and CTI is also nothing new. And shout out to Mighty Ingenuity, who, unlike First, I'm not being paid to say that. They've got a tool called MITRE-TRAM. Maybe some of you are familiar with it in the room. I think it stands for Threat Report Attack Mapping. It's been around for about 3 years now. It's come on quite significantly over the past couple of months. And it'll take a file, it'll consider the sentences inside that file, and then what it'll do is it'll assign attack classifications to it. So you can feed it in a PDF report, and it'll tell you what attack techniques are essentially described in that report. So it'll use a process of natural language processing to take out that sentiment and then assign the attack classifications to it. But it's limited to attack techniques. And in my research, and probably in your research, you want to go a bit further than just assigning attack classifications to bits of your own research or research that others have done. And at the start of this year, with the advent of ChatGPT, I gave a version of this presentation where I considered how a junior analyst getting into the field, who was fairly new to the world of CTI, could start to write structured reports so that they could easily be disseminated to their team and to others outside of their team. And as you can see on the screen through the prompt here, ChatGPT is pretty good at extracting IOCs from some text that you feed it. But I quickly realized the junior analyst needed a structured way to store the information ChatGPT was returning. It's good in a bullet point list like this, but it's not very good when you're looking at machine-to-machine communication, which is ultimately what I was looking to develop. So I needed a standardized way to disseminate this type of information to other people, or really the machines those other people used. Now, I said the company I work for, they use STIX 2.1 as an underlying data model. So they build a tip, and STIX 2.1 is the underlying data format. So it was an easy choice for me as to how I was going to represent that intel. And another shout out to Oasis here. They're doing great work in this area, developing this model. For those unfamiliar with STIX, and it sounds like from the show of hands at the start of this presentation, that's quite a few of you. Firstly, where have you been? But secondly, if I describe STIX in a sentence, it's a standardized way of describing threat intelligence using predefined objects. Campaigns, indicators, malware analysis. You can see a list of them up here. But essentially using this range of objects, you can build graphs that tell a story, if you will. An APT group using an attack pattern in a campaign. All these are STIX objects containing bits of information about the story. The benefit being here is downstream machines, your tip, your SIM, your SAW, can hopefully understand the STIX format and ingest it and utilize it out of the box. So developing that POC for the junior analyst, on the left of the screen here, what you'll see is a prompt describing an infrastructure with a vulnerability. And I've asked ChatGPT to generate a STIX bundle of those objects. So the underlying format of STIX is JSON. So a STIX object is described in JSON, and you can create a bundle of those JSON objects to tell the story, to show that graph that I showed earlier, and also to render what we see here. And the screenshot that you see on the right, I've just simply taken that bundle and put it inside a STIX viewer. And that's the downstream technology in this instance. But that could be a tip, that could be a SIM, again, that could be a SAW. And the viewer that I'm using in this presentation is by an old colleague, created by an old colleague of mine called Sergey, who coincidentally enough is the next speaker. A very smart guy, so I'm looking forward to seeing that presentation. I'm sure it'll be very good. But the too long didn't read version of my previous presentation that I gave a year ago was ChatGPT is pretty good at creating CTI reports. And it's continued to get better over time. Did anyone see the OpenAI Dev Day yesterday? Yes, no, few hands. Well, since the start of the year, way before the Dev Day, ChatGPT introduced the ability to upload images for analysis, which made life really simple for people like me who like to sketch things. And it's such a killer feature in our world. And this is why. So here's an image from a report on Quackbot that I've taken from a PDF. And I've asked GPT to convert it to STIX. So as you'll see, I feed it into the prompt, and I've asked it to convert it again to STIX, sticking with that data format. Now you can see it's detected the IOCs in the image, which is pretty trivial. Regular expression could do that. But it also identifies contextual info that's not present in the text. So here it's identified, as you can see, we've got a STIX object representing malware in the middle, and that malware is Quackbot. Now that's really neat. It knows, or it has the previous intelligence to know that Quackbot is a malware. And this has far-reaching implications. A large part of threat research is researching research. Paying for threat intel feeds is the norm now. I'm sure most of the companies we work for are paying for it. But PDFs, emails, Slack messages, Word documents, blog posts with a mix of text and images are probably sources you rely on day to day, or at least are looking at. And as we've seen, ChatGPT is really good at turning the data found in those reports into structured bundles of intelligence, using STIX in this example. So here we go again. This is another report. This is a string of text from Unit 42, the guys at Palo Alto, and I've put it into a prompt in ChatGPT. So feeding it again into ChatGPT, we get the story described in the text in a structured way, ready for disseminating it to other things. Now, reports can be long, and even feeding in a blog post and asking for a structured JSON output could be restrictive. It requires, in the LLM world, a lot of tokens on the output, because JSON is long and it has a lot of spaces in it. For those who aren't familiar with the concept of tokens, tokens are simply a measure of the context being fed in via the prompts and the output coming out the other side. So you can define it between input tokens and output tokens. When I gave the initial presentation at the start of the year, the token limit for a lot of the OpenAI models was just under 4,000 tokens. Yesterday, the guys at OpenAI announced that there's going to be a GPT-4 turbo model, and that's going to accept 128,000 tokens. So that translates to about 100,000 words or 300 pages. And that covers most Intel reports that I've seen written, except for the ones that have an Intel team with someone who's got an English literature degree. But I also have a confession to make. Whilst I've been showing you a lot of the ChatGPT UI during this presentation, I use the OpenAI API to generate a lot of the bundles that I'm showing you. Forgive me, but I lost the will to live copy and pasting the JSON from the ChatGPT UI into the bundle viewer. But the point being here is this sort of stuff can be done at scale with relative ease, no matter how large the input or output now. So we can start putting in very large documents. And this is superb because ChatGPT is really good at working beyond the IOC, at which point you get into very verbose outputs that are not often structured by nature. Take the analysis of a malware sample, speculating on its purpose or its objectives, identifying what malicious activities that code is actually doing. Again, we can ask ChatGPT, we can feed in the code, and we can ask it to analyze it, and we can ask it to create a structured output. So here you see a malware object and a malware analysis object with the descriptions that ChatGPT has found. And if you look at the analyst value in the STIX object, so one of the fields, you can see the analyst here is ChatGPT, which I think is really cute. But then you go down another level in trying to add structure again. This intelligence you're creating or researching, you want to make it actionable. You want to give it to the SOC guys to start detecting things. And in this example, we take the analysis of a malicious code, and now we start trying to detect it. So here I ask ChatGPT to start creating Splunk detections for Quackbot. And it creates 5. So you can see in the middle the malware object, and then linked to it are 5 indicator objects which contain the Splunk detection inside of them. Now, I don't want this to devolve into a legal debate when it comes to AI, but if any of my old Splunk colleagues are in the room, ChatGPT is stealing your security content. I'll just leave that there. But going back to the malware, the objects printed are not completely standardized in all senses of the word when it comes to CTI when you're working with OpenAI. It's not useful, in this example, if every researcher creates their own Quackbot STIX objects. Why? Because it's hard to deduplicate them when sharing intelligence. Everyone will have their own analysis, which ultimately you can attach to that centralized Quackbot object. But you don't want to have many of those Quackbot objects in the middle because it becomes hard to talk about the same thing. And this is a problem well solved in our industry. It's nothing new, been going on for years. There are lots of centralized knowledge bases that describe data on all types of CTI concepts, malware included. Probably the most widely known of which that almost all of you in the room will be aware of is MITRE ATT&CK. But as you can see, ChatGPT has no idea about the attack data in STIX format. But attack does indeed have a STIX object for Quackbot, so it's wrong in this example. And to me, this is one of the biggest limitations of ChatGPT, especially, and other sort of open, SaaS-based LLMs when it comes to CTI, both where it gets the data from, but also when it got the data. Harking back to my point about job security, the industry moves quickly and the data within it moves quickly. So at this point, the self-styled AI expert goes, let's train a model. And after a few minutes of excitement, thinking you'll change the world, and a bit of Googling, you find this, a DGX A100. 8 GPUs, really powerful machine. You'll need one if you want to train a model. If you're not familiar with British pounds and don't have a currency converted to hand, that's a lot of money. And I don't know these people, but you don't get a lot for your money. And I wanted to put that in there just to show how little you got for your money. Now, you can rent these things by the hour, and it's about $15 to $25 an hour to rent them. And if anyone's interested in teaming up to rent them and share the computing power, let's chat afterwards. But getting back to the point, it's a lot of money, and you probably don't need to train your model. There's something called retrieval augmented generation, and it's usually a better option. I suspect you've probably already used it with ChatGPT without knowing it. Retrieval augmented generation, or RAG as I'll refer to it going forward just for simplicity, I can't really get my tongue around it. It'll give you many of the benefits of fine-tuning a model without actually fine-tuning a model. The idea is to give the data in advance via a prompt. But this assumes you already know the answer. So let's stick with MITRE ATT&CK and STIX for the moment. On the left of the diagram above, I feed ChatGPT with a prompt showing the Quackbot malware STIX object. And the follow-up response on the right, voila. ChatGPT is now aware of Quackbot and its STIX object, or attack-associated STIX object. Now, I hear you ask, rightly, do I need to do this for all of the attack objects and all the other intel sources and knowledge bases I use to be able to get this to work? The answer is yes, but it might not be as difficult as you think. There are a ton of solutions to automate this depending on what you're building. If you're just getting started or interested in this field, take a look at LangChain. Essentially, LangChain is a series of recipes as to how you can get started with retrieval augmented generation at scale, chaining lots of prompts together to get an output. Though retrieval augmented generation, it has its limitations, not least because paying to entertain prompts with each new chat can get very expensive. If you're having to feed in a prompt about MITRE ATT&CK to OpenAI with every new chat, you're having to pay for that in some way. And that pricing model, that token-based pricing model, the size of the input and the number of prompts, it's seen with all public LLMs. So it quickly makes this stuff out of reach for the average person because the costs add up. So sometimes you do need to fine-tune the model. You just can't get around it. And if we stick with OpenAI for a minute, it's surprisingly easy to train some of the OpenAI models, not all of them, but some of them, with chat-based prompting. To do this, you create a JSON-structured training set. And it's really simple to do. Essentially, you're providing it the same question and answer format, but you know both the question and you know both the answer. So the training set has a role, it has the assistant, and it has a user, the assistant being the LLM, the user being the person who's asking the question. So here I feed in, here's the question I have, or here's the information I have as a user, and here's the answer. I don't know if any of you saw the Sigma team update their central rule set yesterday. I mean, I've been feeding that into OpenAI overnight in this way, providing the new Sigma rules. So I can start attaching that to research. Similar to the Splunk detections you see earlier. So taking the intel I've got and trying to find the detection rules that are linked to it. And that cost me about 25 cents to train it in that way, so not a lot of money. But again, the scale of the data is not that large in the Sigma rules example. But there's another problem, and perhaps the biggest when it comes to ChatGPT, or any SaaS LLM. It's data security. No one wants to be a news headline. So with any CISOs in the room, this is arguably maybe your #1 mission at the moment. Stay out of the blog, stay out of the news. Many of you will have already dismissed ChatGPT or this whole presentation for this reason. Many of the clients I work with won't even allow me to utter the words ChatGPT. I can't put my data into ChatGPT, they explain. And I agree with them in many cases, partly due to the content they're looking to put into the prompts. It's sensitive, but also partly due to licensing. It's probably not a good idea to stream a vendor's intel into a publicly available model if you don't want to get sued. The good news is there's lots of open source models that don't require training and have friendly open source licenses. And there's also software that sits on top of those models that allows you to work with them in a user-friendly way. One I found particularly recently, and that's very flexible, is GPT for All. That's what you can see on the screen at the moment. And there's a very low bar to entry with using that. It has an AI, it has a user interface that's very similar to ChatGPT, it has a choice of pre-trained models, so you can cipher between models depending on what it's been trained on and how good that model is for your use case. And most importantly, it has the ability to bring in your own models and use that as the data source. And that's really interesting to me because, as I say, I work for a threat intel company. That threat intel company has a research team. And we have a huge amount of data that's in a structured format from previous years. Attributions, detections, behaviors, analysis of what's going on. And the team continue to produce it, so there's a steady stream. I therefore have the knowledge to start making a specialized and powerful CTI-aware model in a similar way to what I've shown you with ChatGPT and OpenAI. And that's where the second part of this presentation picks up. How to train your own AI model. So using a base model like Llama and feeding it with data from an initial data store can be a lot simpler than you actually think it would be. It's a much more technical presentation and one I give as a workshop, hence I've sort of shown you the basics and guided you into the subject briefly. But as I say, it's really not that difficult to do it, especially if you already have intel held in some sort of data store. A tip, a SIM, maybe your own proprietary data store that you built yourself. So if you're interested in going a bit deeper, I'm going to be around for the rest of today and all of tomorrow, so feel free to drop me a message. I've been David Greenwood. You've been a great audience. For the record, that's my company slogan and not a description of myself. But thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any questions or prompts to David?
Hi, David. Thanks for that. Really interesting. I guess when you kind of operationalize this, are you breaking down your prompts? I saw in one of your screenshots you'd kind of instructed it not to extract relationships, for example. Are you using separate prompts for that? And if yes, kind of how have you found that? Is that more or less accurate?
Sorry, could you ask the question again? I didn't get the first part.
Well, I guess I was trying to talk around how you chunk the prompts into ChatGPT and GPT-4. So I think from what I kind of elicited from the screenshots is you break down a lot of the queries to the model, and at one point you specified not to extract relationships as they are documented in STIX 2.1. So do you have kind of, I guess I was just looking to learn whether you find that's more accurate, you get better precision and recall, breaking down the prompts, or whether one bigger query is equally as effective.
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, and the screenshots in this presentation are an evolution over time. So I think the one you're pointing at was from the very early days of ChatGPT getting onto the scene, and you were really limited by the tokens. So I was thinking, how can I take a PDF report written by some Intel vendor and break it down? And the reality was, it was a real pain. Like, you end up breaking it up, and then you have to go through a process of, how do I join this together again? And that's where the LangChain stuff can help. You can start to automate a lot of that processes. But I was still fairly new to the field at the time. But the reality is, going forward, there's no need to do any of that. These models will accept a hell of a lot of data being put into them. And putting it all into a single prompt, 9 times out of 10, based on my research, is better than trying to break it up. The only argument being, in the CTI context, at least with an open LLM like ChatGPT is, it's not always CTI aware. So sometimes you need to train it on concepts or knowledge it doesn't already have before putting something in. And that's where the series of prompts before that, retrieval, augmented generations, or trying to preempt if you don't have a model that you can train yourself, comes into play. And that's where I break it down now. But 9 times out of 10, I just put in, well, my process will be, if it's a PDF report, take a PDF report, break it up into pages, feed the pages now into ChatGPT and say, extract the text in a structured markdown format and extract the text from the images, and then extract this and describe it in a STIX format and show me what the bundle looks like.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much again. And I think now it's time, give us some seconds for the technical spot. But I think David will be around, so check him out.
I'll be around for the rest of the day and tomorrow. Thanks very much.